May we start just a little bit early? Because there are so many activities going on today that many of our members will have to leave shortly. And so maybe if we get a little bit of a head start here, we can at least open our meeting. The meeting will come to order. And without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Before I deliver my opening remarks, I wanted to note that today the committee is meeting both in person and virtually. I want to announce a couple of reminders to members about the conduct of this hearing. First, members and staff who are attending in person may choose to be masked, but it is not a requirement. However, any individual with symptoms, a positive test, or exposure to someone with COVID-19 should wear a mask while present. Members who are attending virtually should keep their video feed on as long as they are present in the hearing. Members are responsible for their own microphones, so please also keep your microphones muted until you are speaking. And finally, if members have documents they wish to submit to the record, please email them to the committee clerk, whose email address was circulated prior to the meeting. Good afternoon to our members and to our panelists, and thank you for joining us here today. It has been my honor to chair this committee for the past 4 years. For three decades, I have served on this committee. Over all that time, and prior to my tenure in Washington, I have been passionate about breaking down barriers for women. I left unaddressed. Hostile cultures keep women and marginalized individuals from achieving their full potential and hinder our progress. So as a result, I can think of no more important hearing than the one we're holding today to conclude my time on the Science Committee. The U.S. Antarctic program funds cutting-edge and essential research that cannot take place anywhere but Antarctica. In harsh conditions, geologists peer millions of years into the past by boring deep into the ice sheet. Dark skies, often an unparalleled sight to observe distant galaxies. Biologists study life that thrives in extreme conditions on land and undersea. Unfortunately, the challenges facing scientists in Antarctica are not merely those imposed by the elements. While several federal agencies support research in Antarctica, the National Science Foundation has the responsibility of managing all U.S. Antarctic research activities. In August, the National Science Foundation released a report on sexual harassment and assaults in the Antarctic program. Its findings are sobering. The research and the report contains harrowing stories of individuals enduring threats to their physical safety, gender taunts, and intimidation. Community members do not trust the agency or contractor to keep them safe from these harms. Multiple people spoke of their fear of being retaliated against for reporting an assault. Survivors and advocates on ICE fear they will be placed on a blacklist. Meanwhile, high-ranking perpetrators receive apologies instead of penalties. We must not tolerate any culture that enables pervasive harassment and assault. While the Antarctic program presents unique challenges, such as challenges must not be used as an excuse for an inadequate response and corrective actions. I am proud that the committee passed the Combating Sexual Harassment in Science Act. This became law this summer in the CHIPS and Science Act. But clearly, there's more work to be done, including when it comes to the responsibility of federal contractors. Today, we will discuss how all stakeholders must engage with one another and with the Antarctic community. Companies have a responsibility to protect employee privacy. However, the National Science Foundation must have the necessary information to keep people safe and to keep offenders off the ice. The Shapa report may be focused on Antarctica, but these problems plague field sites beyond the continent. I hope that the CHIPS and science provisions and what we learned today serve as a foundation for further action. I've been heartened by the bipartisan action of this committee has taken to address sexual harassment, and it is my hope that this work will continue into the next Congress. I'll take this moment to thank each and every member of this committee and our committee staffs for getting us to this point. And finally, before I yield to Ranking Member Lucas, I'd just like to close by noting that this is the last full committee hearing that the Science, Space, and Technology Committee will hold for the 117th Congress. It is also the last hearing I will chair as member of Congress. Given that, I just want to take a moment to express my deep appreciation to members and staff for us hanging together and doing a good amount of work. And in that regard, I want to give my special thanks to Ranking Member Lucas. He has been a constructive partner in what I've tried to accomplish, as well as a good friend and professional. I am confident he will continue the bipartisan approach to the committee in the 118th Congress. And we've had over the past 2 Congresses, and he knows that I will be watching him to make sure he does. And with that, I express my profound appreciation to every member and every staff member of this committee. And with that, I will yield to my colleague, Ranking Member Lucas.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Johnson, and thank you for holding this important hearing. Today's hearing shines a light on the concerning findings from the recent report commissioned by the National Science Foundation. The report found that there is a rampant culture of sexual harassment and assault in the remote research environment of Antarctica. As I have said before, sexual harassment and gender discrimination are unacceptable in any situation, period. It's wrong, it's illegal, and it's imperative that we end it. The report we are discussing today details a troubling culture at the United States Antarctic program. The program operates 3 year-round research stations and provides logistics support for field research. Each year, 3,500 Americans are involved in the program's research and logistical activities. This includes teams of researchers, students, federal contractors, and military members. Before diving into the report, I want to recognize that the research conducted on the ice is vitally important to the understanding of our planet and to our nation's scientific leadership. The Antarctic presents a unique climate and environment that will allow us to conduct research that cannot be performed anywhere else in the world, such as detecting neutrinos. In 2009, I visited the Antarctic to view the research facilities and environment. This trip provided me with perspective on the importance of research being conducted there, but also the environmental challenges of such remote fieldwork, which are hard to understand without experiencing them firsthand. It is the stark isolation of the Antarctic environment that makes the report's findings particularly concerning. According to the report, insufficient safety precautions, failures in broadband connectivity, and a lack of clear, transparent reporting structures have all contributed to an unsafe culture at the Antarctic research facilities. The science community faces unique challenges when it comes to addressing harassment, particularly in remote field stations. Individuals working in science who are affected by sexual harassment and discrimination can suffer long-term harm to their education and careers, as well as to their mental and physical well-being. While we can't lose sight of the individual cost, we must also think about the cost to our society and the economy as a whole. Engaging more women in STEM studies and careers is essential to American competitiveness. If we want to have the strongest STEM workforce in the world, it is vital that our research environments foster a safe and accountable culture. I want to acknowledge some of the efforts that have been undertaken at the NSF since the report's release to improve the culture of the U.S. Antarctic program. NSF took positive steps by commissioning this report and seriously addressing its findings. I'm pleased that NSF plans to increase training and vetting for individuals going to the ice and to establish a reporting hotline. I urge NSF to remain attentive to these issues, not only in Antarctica, but also other remote field work environments. The Science Committee has worked on a bipartisan basis to address these issues, such as harassment and discrimination in science. Products of our work were included in the recently passed CHIPS and Science Act. However, the report we are discussing today demonstrates that there's still more work to do, particularly on addressing the issues of harassment in the field. Today's hearing will raise some difficult questions, many without easy answers. How do we address these issues both fairly and safely? How do we navigate policies for remote field environments that are vastly different from each other? How do we navigate different command structures between the NSF, contractors, military members, and visiting scientists? I hope our witnesses and other stakeholders can help us navigate these questions. I'm looking forward to hearing more about how we can address the findings of the report to ensure that the Antarctic research program is safe for everyone living and working on the ice. Now, if I could take a moment of personal privilege. As the chairwoman noted, this is our last hearing together, full committee hearing in this session of Congress. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the chairwoman for her leadership and partnership on this issue as well as so many others. Chair, I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to note it. It has truly been an honor to serve with you, and I wish you all the best in whatever lies ahead of you. I have a hard time believing that retirement means retirement with you, but whatever lies ahead, the best of wishes, and I have the highest of expectations about what you'll accomplish there too. Again, thank you, Chairwoman Johnson, for holding this hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness, Dr. Karen Marrongelle, the Chief Operating Officer of the National Science Foundation. In this role, she oversees operations of the agency and its missions. Prior to this role, she served as the Assistant Director of Education and Human Resources Directorate at the NSF, and as the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Portland State University. Our next witness, Ms. Kathleen Naeher. Ms. Naeher is the Chief Operating Officer of the Civil Group of Leidos. In this role, she worked with the Civil Group leadership team to drive operational performance and alignment with the annual operating plan and market strategies. Prior to this position, she served for more than 35 years at the Central Intelligence Agency, most recently as CIA's Associate Deputy Director of Digital Innovation. Our third witness, Dr. Angela Olinto. Dr. Olinto is the Dean of Division of Physical Sciences at the Abbott Michelson Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago, which manages the South Pole Telescope. At the University of Chicago, she was the first woman to receive tenure in the Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and the first woman to become chair of any department in the Physical Sciences Division, and the first woman to become Dean of Physical Sciences Division. Our next witness, Dr. Ann Kelly. Dr. Kelly is presently the Deputy Director of the Nature Conservancy in her home state of Alaska. Prior to this role, she served on site as the Director of Research and Education at Cal State University's Desert Studies Center. She also served as the director of UC's Merced Field Station at your site in Sequoia National Parks. Dr. Kelly gained experience fighting harassment in STEM as a board member of the Organizational Biological Field Stations, a team member of the Advanced GEO project, and through advocacy and policy development at the USGS and several universities. Our witnesses should know that you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. So when you have completed your spoken testimony, we will begin questions. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. Dr. Marrongelle.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Lucas, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Karen Marrongelle, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the National Science Foundation. I would like to start by thanking this committee for the continued strong support of the NSF. Your leadership in passing the CHIPS and Science Act will ensure that the United States remains the global leader in research and innovation for generations to come. We have to recognize that in order to fully engage this nation's incredible talent, we must ensure that our research environments, from the lab to the most remote field sites, are free of harassment and provide the safety and support necessary to allow ingenuity and innovation to flourish. NSF does not tolerate harassment in any research setting. It is because of our deep commitment to this principle that NSF commissioned the Sexual Assault and Harassment Prevention and Response Report for NSF's U.S. Antarctic program in order to address and understand what is not working. We are proud to be a leader in taking proactive approaches to address harassment, and we will continue to endeavor to eliminate sexual harassment within the science and engineering community. The report is deeply troubling and demonstrates a need to fundamentally change the culture and practices that govern research in Antarctica. As a female mathematician and leader in STEM, I know too well the challenges individuals can face as a result of actions from some members of the scientific community. There are few locations that are so important to our understanding of the world around us than the Antarctic continent. Since 1956, Americans have been studying the Antarctic and its interactions with the rest of the planet and taking advantage of the unique atmosphere to study the cosmos. The community consists of almost 3,000 people who travel to the ice every year, from researchers to support personnel and contractors, staff from multiple federal agencies, and military personnel. NSF is extremely proud of the U.S. Antarctic program and the people who make up this incredible community. However, the report also showed us that we need to take swift action to address very troubling reports of assault and harassment and an environment that was hostile for many individuals. Shortly after receiving the report, NSF leadership directed an agency-wide response to take the actions necessary to systematically address the findings, implement near-term solutions, and evaluate longer-term needs and actions. Most importantly, the safety of all deployers was and continues to be our highest priority. Each of the steps NSF has taken and our progress to date are detailed in my written testimony. However, I would like to highlight just a few. First, we took swift action to reassess the terms of NSF's Antarctic support contract. This action included the negotiation and implementation of new contract terms with Leidos. Those modifications are aimed at ensuring ethical conduct, screening of personnel, and oversight. In addition, NSF established a Sexual Assault and Harassment Prevention and Response Support Office in order to provide the necessary resources to support deployed personnel on matters relating to sexual assault and harassment, and to remove barriers and provide an independent line of reporting for victims of sexual assault and harassment matters. NSF is enacting a multifaceted plan that targets prevention, uses up-to-date training methods, and addresses the complexity of reporting incidents where multiple employers and agencies intersect. In addition, we are working to create an environment which empowers deployers to speak up when they see or experience sexual assault or harassment, and empowers management to take swift and appropriate action. We will be conducting annual climate surveys to help us understand if our actions are contributing to a culture shift and what, if anything, we need to change. NSF will continue to take steps to ensure that all research environments are free of harassment in any form and that research can thrive in collaborative, supportive, and safe environments. Transformational change requires a community effort. We can set the tone for the changes we expect to see, but we need partners in realizing our vision. NSF is committed to working with the entire community to take the steps necessary to eliminate sexual assault and harassment at our Antarctic stations, vessels, and field camps. We appreciate the continued strong support of this committee and look forward to working with you to address this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kathleen Naeher.
Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Lucas, and members of the committee. My name is Kathleen Naeher, and I am the Chief Operating Officer in the Civil Group at Leidos. Leidos appreciates the committee holding this important hearing and is deeply committed to working in partnership with the National Science Foundation and this committee to address concerns about sexual harassment for those deployed to Antarctica. I help to oversee our work in Antarctica and in connection with the Antarctic Support Contract. I have been closely involved in our efforts to address the important issues the committee is exploring today. Let me be crystal clear. There is no place for harassment of any sort in any workplace, be it on ice or elsewhere. As a company with a long history of providing technology, engineering, and scientific experience to our customers, including the federal government, Leidos is committed to doing everything possible to provide a safe and secure workplace wherever we operate. Since 2018, Leidos has been recognized by Ethisphere as one of the world's most ethical companies. Leidos is proud to partner with the NSF to support the United States Antarctic program and the important work being conducted. As the prime contractor to NSF, Leidos does not oversee or perform scientific research. Instead, our role is to provide the support services that allow the scientists on the ice to do their work. The jobs Leidos and its subcontractors do represent a wide range of trades and skills, including engineers, waste management, construction workers, medical professionals, fire and rescue, cooks and kitchen workers, janitorial services, logistics specialists, mechanics, air support, finance, HVAC specialists, and many others. We essentially run a small town, all to support the science being conducted there. Before coming to Leidos, I spent over 30 years at the CIA, where I worked in difficult and demanding settings around the world, including in multiple war zones. Even when compared to those locations, Antarctica presents complex and unique challenges, which I saw firsthand when I was on ice last month. Given the extremely remote and harsh conditions, working in Antarctica is difficult and isolating. Connectivity is limited, making communications difficult. Because people working in this remote environment share living and working spaces for months at a time, it is hard to have private time or separation from your coworkers. Further complicating the environment, there are a number of different stakeholders operating alongside each other. While a number of people work in the same setting or location, they report to different employers or agencies, each with its own requirements, expectations, and policies for addressing workplace matters on ice. Though the complicated nature of the work environment presents unique complexities as it relates to workplace safety, including with respect to preventing and reporting harassment, we take all reports of potential misconduct seriously. Since becoming NSF's prime contractor in Antarctica in 2016, Leidos has taken a number of steps to improve the culture and conditions on ice and to foster a safe and protective workplace. For example, in 2019, Leidos strengthened requirements relating to prevention and response training for sexual harassment and assault, including providing ally training to station leadership and subcontract line managers. In 2020, Leidos deployed a full-time counselor on site to provide counseling services to all people deployed on ICE, including grantees, NSF, and military personnel. Leidos added workshops addressing workplace culture in 2020, and in 2021, we established the ASC Inclusion Council, and our ASC HR managers received certifications as victims advocates. After receiving the SAFA report this summer, we continued our efforts to improve the culture and conditions on ASC in coordination with the NSF. This issue has the intention of the highest levels of Leidos. In particular, the company established a task force in July 2022 to address the specific concerns raised in the SAFA report. The resulting action plan includes multiple ongoing work streams focused on enhancing harassment prevention training, encouraging reporting of concerns, improving physical safety, including for grantees working in the field, and collaborating with their subcontract teams to strengthen and improve consistency in responding to reports of sexual harassment and assault. In conclusion, I was inspired during my recent visit to see the level of dedication to the mission among the staff in Antarctica. Leidos shares this commitment, both to the mission and to ensuring a safe environment for those living and working there. We are pleased to partner with NSF to continue to make progress in this area so that the important scientific work in Antarctica can continue free from harassment of any kind. I would like to reiterate my thanks to the committee for addressing this important issue and to Chairwoman Johnson for her leadership throughout her career. We at Leidos wish you the best in your upcoming retirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Angela Olinto.
Thank you. Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Lucas, and members of the committee, thank you for your leadership and for inviting me to share the importance of building a safer Antarctic research environment from a research university's perspective. I'm Angela Olinto, the Dean of the Physical Sciences Division at the University of Chicago. Some of the field-defining projects in our division can only be done in the Antarctic continent. These projects range from small teams studying the ice sheets in Antarctica, the world-leading astronomical observatories at the South Pole, and sponsored scientific balloon by NASA. NASA launches our instruments from McMurdo because it enables them to fly for weeks to months around the Antarctic continent, following the polar vortex winds. The South Pole is one of the best places on Earth to study the universe because it is about 9,300 feet in elevation with a very dry and thin atmosphere and 6 months of darkness during the polar winter. For decades, researchers from the University of Chicago and many other institutions have led observatories at the pole to significantly advance the fields of cosmology and astroparticle physics. Today, our researchers operate the powerful South Pole Telescope with its third-generation camera and are part of the impressive IceCube Neutrino Observatory. Two of the top priorities from the most recent decadal survey in astronomy and astrophysics conducted by the National Academy of Sciences will be located at the South Pole, CMBS-4 and IceCube Gen 2. These work to understand the earliest moments of the universe and the highest energy events in the universe. These cutting-edge research projects could not be done without the continued support of Congress, NSF, NASA, and the U.S. Antarctic Program. The wide scientific community and human curiosity in general are extremely grateful to these institutions for supporting these unique opportunities to understand our origins, our place in the universe, and the dynamics and limits of the planet we call home. Given our strong commitment to supporting an inclusive environment for the diverse set of creative minds who want to contribute to these groundbreaking scientific efforts, it was with great concern that we learned about the findings of the Sexual Assault, Harassment, Prevention, and Response Report. As a woman in a historically male-dominated field, the unwelcome environment for women in STEM has been an important issue throughout my career. When I was a PhD at MIT, we were only 3% women. Now I'm happy to report that women PhD students in our division have reached 35%, and women faculty are about 20%. Women scientists have become leaders of many of the field-defining efforts at remote locations like Antarctica. We need to work harder to eradicate sexual harassment and any other kind of discrimination, harassment, or assault in STEM fields. When I learned about the report, I consulted with some of our researchers about their own experiences in the Antarctic continent. Unfortunately, they were not surprised by the report findings. We commend NSF Office of Polar Program for engaging with subject matter experts to examine the sexual harassment and assault concerns in the USEP community and to identify corrective actions to improve the climate and trust in the community. We agree with the recommendations to improve communications, increase engagement, enhance education and training, strengthen reporting infrastructure and accountability, provide support to victims, and probe more deeply into policies and mechanisms aimed at prevention. Universities and research teams also need to do more. The potential for unacceptable behavior can occur in other remote locations that share the characteristics of the Antarctic fieldwork: geographical isolation, limited communication, and unclear hierarchical power dynamics. We want to reiterate to all our community that discrimination, harassment, or assault in any setting is unacceptable and unlawful. All our community members are expected to abide by the university's policy on discrimination, harassment, and sexual misconduct while performing remote fieldwork. We are working to better prepare our community to be in remote locations. We now have a remote field research website with resources. We will provide some training for team leaders and ombudspeople on best practices before their trips. Improve communications between these points of contact and the institutions involved in the remote field research is very important for changing the culture and preventing unacceptable and unlawful behavior such as discrimination, harassment, or assault. The astonishing discoveries that can only be done in remote locations will continue to captivate the public and inspire future generations of diverse minds to study scientific and technical fields that will further enrich the prosperity of this great nation. We need to do our best to provide the most welcoming and safe environments for all involved in expanding our scientific knowledge. Thank you for listening. I'll be pleased to answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now, final witness, Dr. Ann Kelly.
Hello, and thank you to Representative Johnson and the committee for inviting me today. And I thank you all for your leadership and effort towards making a safer workplace for scientists. I'm Ann Kelly, the Deputy Director for the Nature Conservancy, Alaska. I'm here to tell you that Antarctica is not an isolated problem, and I'm here to share with you how we can make meaningful change to prevent this. Surveys show that most field researchers experience harassment or assault. Harassment in the field can cause profound damage to scientists' health, psyche, and career, as we've heard about today. Harassers more frequently target junior scientists, women, racial minorities, and queer scientists, driving underrepresented scientists out of their research careers. Harassment damages the potential of diverse scientists and the endeavor of science itself. The conditions that promote harassment in Antarctica are found in nearly every small field camp, large field station, and ocean research vessel. Strong hierarchies, remoteness and isolation, difficult physical conditions, macho work cultures, and a lack of institutional support are the norm for field researchers everywhere. Harassment in the field takes many forms. The horrific harassment and assault in the Antarctic report is only the tip of the iceberg. Far more common are the daily aggressions of insults, exclusions, and threats. Scientists are told to toughen up, fall in line, and stay quiet to prove their worth. As a researcher for the U.S. Geologic Survey, my colleagues and I investigated anti-harassment policies. For months, our emails to EEOC went unanswered. Our voicemails to whistleblower hotlines were never returned. Support websites were outdated and broken. Policies to support field scientists were non-existent, so we created a few of our own. While director of 3 remote field stations, I led several international initiatives to change field culture and to fight harassment, including development of policies for dozens of field research stations. I also collaborate with the geoscience team to train academics nationwide to fight harassment in field research. My colleagues and I have been pushing change from the grassroots by developing our own tools to help us survive. Ultimately, accountability for real change lies with institutional leaders. To provide leadership with guidance for change, the NSF funded Dr. Kristen Yarnsik, then at the Center for Ocean Leadership, and myself to lead development of robust recommendations for institutional change in field and ocean research. We convened 70 experts to develop recommendations for preventing and responding to harassment in field science. The group identified 52 best practices for institutions to address harassment in the field. The recommendations provide meaningful results through institutional structural change rather than relying on mere good intentions. Findings targeted 4 major topics. First, field climate and culture change. Second, accountability. The third, policy development. And the fourth, reporting. So for field climate and culture change, hostile climate is the greatest factor in enabling harassment and assault. Behavioral standards must be defined, communicated, and normalized, much like job safety standards. These standards must be included in hiring, evaluations, promotion, and tenure. Poor behavior must be acted on. As with other safety assessments, conduct risk assessments around harassment and assault. For accountability, permissive environments lead to more harassment and a reluctance of targets to report. Institutions must hold research leaders accountable for safe and equitable work environments. Leadership must develop protocols for safe and equitable practices. They must train workers and hold them accountable for those practices. Create, publicize, and enforce consequences. Create protections for targets of harassment and repair harms. Hold all relevant institutional jurisdictions responsible. Third, policy. Policy must set explicit standards for behavior in the field, for reporting and record keeping of incidents, and for clear consequences for harassment. Safety nets must be created for targets of harassment. Policies that are meaningfully enforced give targets incentive to report and remove implicit permission for harassment and other bad behavior. Finally, reporting. Reporting in remote research is challenging due to unclear jurisdictions and a lack of communications reporting avenues. Allow multiple mechanisms for communication for unrestricted private use, like making radios and sat phones available to contact help. Have multiple avenues for reporting, including multiple contacts on-site and off-site from all jurisdictions. Create reporting and record keeping for minor and major transgressions. Best practices don't rely on retraining individuals' attitudes and asking them to do better. Good institutional structures and incentives make it possible to do the right thing. Invest real resources to build and support these critical institutional structures. Our culture of harassment is as pervasive as the air we breathe, so it can be hard to imagine something different. I urge this committee to push research institutions so the scientific community can thrive and rise to the many challenges facing our society and our planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, we will begin our first rounds of questions, and the chair recognizes herself for 5 minutes. Dr. Marrongelle, this report identified a number of shortcomings in the USAP. One of the primary concerns is the National Science Foundation's access to information involving cross-jurisdictional incidents. There's a troubling perception that NSF has been willfully unaware of the problem. Some feel NSF has been hiding behind contractor HR policies to avoid accountability. Now I understand that NSF has since taken steps to modify its contract with Leidos, but in my view, more needs to be done. As a federal agency charged with managing ASAP, NSF should have the information and leverage it needs to ensure the environment is safe for all participants. Do you see the upcoming repeat for the Antarctica support contract as an opportunity to make significant changes to the contract terms? And if so, what changes are you exploring?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for that question. Yes, so as you know, we have already put into place contract modifications with the existing Leidos contract in response to what we heard from the SAFR report. As we think forward to the recompetition, we're going to take both the lessons learned from the modifications that we made and in the intervening upcoming months, how those modifications are taking place, the impact that they're having on personnel vetting, on response times to allegations, and importantly, the management of subcontractors. So we intend to continue to learn over the next several months and roll those learnings into the next recompete of the next Antarctic contract.
Thank you very much. Ms. Naeher, Leidos open to firmer contract terms that clarify your responsibility for maintaining a safe environment. What are you planning, and what is Leidos planning to compete for that contract and that expires in 2025?
Chairwoman, so we partner and collaborate with NSF consistently throughout to make sure we have a safe environment for all our employees. We're open to anything that creates a safer and healthier environment. We would show the things that we've already started, the HR consortium, the increased contact with our subcontractors, the on-ice counselor, the things that we've done in the past and that we continue to do in partnership with NSF, so that NSF would be confident in our ability to create that environment on ice.
Thank you very much. Any further testimony that anyone would like to give related to this issue? Well, thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Marrongelle, thank you for appearing before us today on behalf of the NSF. I'd like to ask you about the NSF's strategy to address the findings of the report. What short-term actions has NSF taken in response to the finding of the report?
Thank you for that question. So we have 8 actions that we are focused on in the short term, and I'll review those. The first, and these are all, I must say that our primary focus is to take care of victims, and so these actions are victim focused. So first is to outline a single communication point at NSF for sexual assault and harassment matters, and to that end, we have stood up an Office of Sexual Assault and Harassment Prevention and Response within the foundation. In the short term, this office is strategically focused on the Antarctic continent, but we intend to broaden this office to take a further look at all research vessel, field site, and infrastructure anywhere where science is taking place. The next is specific resources for victims on the ice. We now have an on-ice advocate whose job on the ice at McMurdo Station is to provide counseling and support specifically for sexual assault and harassment. We have received already reports back that the presence of that advocate has been game-changing for the work that's going on there. Third, we have an increased presence and visits to the ice. So the on-ice advocate, in addition to some of senior personnel from NSF, conducted 7 listening sessions for community input to further gather information about our plans moving forward and the gaps in those plans, what we need to change moving forward. Fourth, we've increased the vetting for any personnel who's traveling to the ice. This was part of what we did with the contract modifications, but also our internal processes. So at this point, individuals who are traveling to the ice receive vetting that's equivalent to federal employees. Fifth is accountability. We've established points of contact with senior leadership at all of our partner institutions, Leidos, other federal agencies who have a presence and provide us services on the ice. The reason for that is so that we have someone that we can go to at the top and in addition to staff members, so that if issues are coming up that are not getting resolved, we have the commitment and buy-in from top-level leadership at these organizations. We've also improved training. So we have new training modules for all individuals who travel to Antarctica. There's a focus this year on bystander intervention, and we will be reviewing the impact of those modules and revising as necessary moving forward. We've already received some great input on how to do that. We've also enhanced physical safety measures. One of the key findings from the SAPRA report pointed out some of the limitations of the physical infrastructure in Antarctica, And so, for instance, we are ensuring by the end of the season that keyholes will be, or peepholes will be installed in all doors at all stations for living quarters. We've also enhanced the security clearances for those who have access to master keys. And then finally, we have instituted additional satellite phones for those in remote field stations so that at least 2 of those communication devices are sent out with every field team. And then finally, the director has instituted a task force on sexual assault and harassment at NSF. I chair that task force. We meet weekly. Again, currently, our focus is acutely on the situation in Antarctica. As we start to see the effects of what we've been doing in Antarctica to make changes, we'll be revising, but then also broadening this to other field stations and institutes.
Thank you. And in my remaining time, Ms. Naeher, can you describe what specific policies or procedures that Leidos has changed since the release of the report?
Thank you. So Leidos has always had strong policies and procedures in place to make sure the workplace is safe and harassment-free. So since the report, we reinvigorated our HR consortium, which was a group of all the different subcontractors, just to ensure that everybody was applying policies consistently across the board. And it was a way for us to share best practices and also to increase that communication that the report showed was needed. We also worked very closely on implementing some of the changes that NSF has just identified, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looks like my time has expired.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Cheryl.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I found that answer a bit unsatisfactory from Ms. Naeher, that Leidos has always had strong policies in place to make sure the workplace is harassment-free, because obviously those policies didn't work to make sure the workplace was harassment-free. So I definitely think we need to move in a better direction, and I think the first part of that is admitting that we have a problem here. From my time in the military, we do have a lot of places that we operate in the military that are very isolated, and we've had problems historically. Is there training, because I do worry that some of these research scientists maybe have not had the position of leadership or management that they are now being put in to ensure, because a lot of this starts at the top, as we all know. If you have a good command structure, that often can protect people below. Is there good training going on to ensure that new leaders understand their role and can ensure that people below them are protected and safe?
I'll start with that. It's such a great question. So the training that we specifically included bystander training in our training materials this year, as I had mentioned. And some of what we've learned from the listening sessions is that we need to, moving forward, have individualized training for different sets of individuals on the ice. So for instance, for managers and supervisors, what they can do to recognize retaliation if that's happening, to combat retaliation if that's happening. And then similarly, for our senior scientists who are leading research teams. So we know that we have more work to do in that space. I think some of the actions that my colleagues have pointed out are really moving in that direction. And we have some great models from the University of Chicago for how we can provide that training to not only the senior level PIs, but also graduate students and postdocs and others who may need to take on leadership roles as they are traveling in teams to the ice.
I think that one of the challenges that we were talking just before this hearing is the communications. I think we have infrastructures and institutions to address some of the issues, but when you have a small team in an isolated place, it can become unclear who to go to, and many things don't get talked to, and there's an atmosphere that that's the way it is, right? So we need to break that cycle. And we have been doing on our end, making sure there's always an obvious point of contact. Sometimes it's the PI, but sometimes the PI is not there. Sometimes it's a postdoc, sometimes it's a senior graduate student, to make sure that within the science community, we have the person who will be watching and will be able to know what to do. And then given hopefully nothing happens, but if something happens, they know exactly how to contact NSF or Leidos or whoever is involved in that situation. So I think the communication lines, we are working hard to make that more clear. And Antarctica is a really good place to focus, but this happens in other places too. And so as an institution, we want to broaden that ability to understand your responsibility. We are all responsible.
And it sounds like you're doing some training to help leaders know who to go to. Does every individual know who they go to? So if, for example, I experienced sexual assault or harassment, would I know exactly who I could report that to receive help?
Let me answer on the scientist side. I think that wasn't true before this report. There is a camaraderie between the groups that go together, but nobody was necessarily responsible, at least within small groups, to be the one except for the PI, but the PI might not be there. So that's one of the things we're fixing, right? So I think that is crucial. But there are many other communities that have, like the contractors and others, but in the science roles, for sure.
Yeah,
I want to add too, sorry, that often it's the leadership themselves that are conducting the harassment. And, you know, one of the necessary support structures that needs to be built here is that there are alternative reporting mechanisms and that the leadership of any one team is not the gatekeeper for reporting.
I think that's a great point. I think there have to be an understanding of who needs to be reported to, but then alternatives to that. And it sounds as if while the scientific community is taking this very seriously, I do have some concerns about Leidos and their contractors, and if they have a plan for any of these things. I have not heard that today, but it looks like my time is about to expire, so I yield back.
Mr. Posey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you also for your years of leadership, fair and handed leadership. I don't know anyone who doesn't appreciate it. Dr. Marrongelle, a number of witnesses' testimonies discussed the presence of other federal agencies on the ice. Could you provide some insight into how the National Science Foundation coordinates with those other federal agencies like NASA and NOAA, as well as federal contractors when making policies on the ice?
Yes, absolutely. So in this specific situation, the director and myself, we have reached out to our equivalents at the other federal agencies, so specifically NASA, NOAA, the Air Force, and the Navy. So we have talked with them about the seriousness of the findings in this report and given them insight into the steps that we're taking moving forward. We've also asked them to identify members of their staffs that can act as points of contact, specifically when and if allegations of sexual assault and harassment come in. Generally, we do have ongoing relationships with program managers at the other federal agencies. So as we are developing new policies, new procedures, we have ongoing consultation with them. I'll also add that our colleagues have been wonderful in sharing their findings and best practices in these areas of sexual assault and harassment with us. So we are currently reviewing those documents and understanding where we don't need to reinvent the wheel, what we can take from our partner agencies and apply those learnings to the situation.
Thank you. As a follow-up, has the National Science Foundation shared the sexual assault, harassment, prevention, and response report and its findings with other federal agencies?
Yes, and in fact, this is on our website, so anyone from the public can access it.
Excellent. And how is the National Science Foundation planning to coordinate on the implementation of the new policies resulting from the report with other federal agencies in Antarctica?
Right. So those points of contact are critical. So it was really important to the director and I that we set the tone from the top, that NSF has no tolerance for harassment and that we expect the same of our partners. So we'll be coordinating primarily through those points of contact at the more programmatic levels. And at the and throughout the agencies, and if needed, the director and I will step in to get involved if that's called for.
That's excellent. I see my time has expired. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stevens is recognized.
Thank you. And before I start my line of questioning, I've waited a long time to do this. When Chairwoman Johnson announced her retirement, the following committee hearing, everyone celebrated her. But I decided I was going to wait to the last committee hearing of the 117th Congress that she was chairing to salute and recognize her incredible leadership as chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. It has been my deep honor to serve alongside you, Madam Chair, and as your vice chair. And we will forever look back on the imprint that you have made on this nation and for women in STEM. Thank you. And with that, Ms. Naeher, okay, this hearing is an opportunity to discuss the issue of sexual harassment in the SAPER report. It was shocking to read, and obviously it should have been a wake-up call for you, the National Science Foundation, and anyone that deploys people to the Arctic. And certainly appreciate you making an appearance, but I think you got 500 words here, maybe, in your testimony, and so I'm a little disappointed by the level of detail that you have offered in your statement. And you just touched upon the steps that Leidos has been taking since reviewing the report. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to be a little bit more specific here. What are you doing to encourage reporting? Have you addressed the distrust of HR by altering the reporting pipeline or offering alternative reporting procedures? And are you recruiting a better crop of HR personnel and training them properly?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to add some more here on what we've been doing. So I was very pleased when I was just on ice recently. There could be no doubt in anyone's mind how serious everyone is taking this. From the moment I found I was going and went through the mandatory training that has to take both here at Leidos and from NSF, you can see the concern and the effort that is being put forward to make sure everyone is aware of the situation and ways to combat harassment. This training, my cohort that had to take it in New Zealand was extremely engaged across the board. People were offering suggestions, offering what they would do as a bystander, making sure everyone knew different avenues that they could report. So the signage as well, down on ice, people know harassment of any type is not tolerated and where to go to report it. In addition to that, we stood up an oversight board after the SAFR report came out. We share everybody's concern when we read the report, immediately convened a task force here as to how we could address it. We had people in all different work streams here. So we had our contracts people involved, legal involved, ethics, HR certainly, policy, subcontracts. We came up with 6 different work streams that we are addressing. I mentioned some of them in my statement. You'll see them there about increasing communication and collaboration with our subs, increasing the awareness of reporting options. And we'll continue to work these. This oversight board meets every 2 weeks where we gauge progress, see if we have the right actions that need to be completed. And then we are constantly in coordination with NSF sharing where we are in this aspect.
And can you just touch on the physical safety improvements that have been made?
Yeah, so there's 3, I think, major ones. So, and I believe NSF mentioned some of them. That was the peepholes, the door locks at all our stations, key management of master keys. And then one that was more than one person mentioned to me when I was down on ice, how appreciated this was. And that was an additional satellite phone to all teams going out. So this meant there wasn't just one phone held by the PI, but they were, the policy was to give it to the highest ranking member and the lowest ranking member. So they would each have a phone and would have ways to communicate if there were any issues while out in the field.
Great. And with that, Madam Chair, for the last time, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garcia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to commend the chairwoman for her service to this beautiful nation. Salute to you, ma'am, for everything you've done. And to our witnesses, thank you. I think this is probably the most important climate change hearing. I've been a part of a lot of climate change hearings in the 3 years that I've been here in Congress. This is probably the most important. The climate where we actually not just adopt a zero-tolerance mentality against harassment, discrimination, and assault, but we actually implement it and we hold people accountable. And I think that's the part that's missing in all of these conversations that we've had here so far. I appreciate that you've been introspective enough to do the surveys and look at the data. But I'm frankly a little flabbergasted that some of the results and some of the lessons learned are pretty low-hanging fruit that I would have thought we would have done before we sent anyone down to the Antarctic. The fact that we didn't have locks on doors and no key management to protect people is a little underwhelming in my opinion. I guess my question is to Dr. Marrongelle and Ms. Naeher, how many allegations have we had of specifically harassment and assault?
So we have information that we can share with the committee. In 2013, we instituted a code of conduct specifically to address some of the climate issues that were starting to arise. It's very broad and it covers a variety of incidents from alcohol abuse through to sexual assault. So we're happy to share that. This year, we are requiring our contractors and partner organizations to report to us on a quarterly basis those incidents. So we are awaiting those reports to come in. New this year also, as I had mentioned, is the on-ice advocate. And so we know that individuals on the ice are taking advantage of the services of the on-ice advocate. Time will tell whether those result in increased formal complaints and allegations. So we will need some time to match up the data there.
Okay, Ms. Naeher, do you have concrete numbers on how many allegations have been made?
Yes, we've been tracking that number for.
What is that? What is that number?
I can get you the exact number. I'm happy to follow up on that. I can tell you that we do investigate every allegation that has been brought to us.
Right. Yeah, I have no doubt about that. I guess my concern is if you guys are coming to testify in front of Congress about a severe problem and something that is a culture issue, you should have those numbers at your hip right now and be informing us of this information. When I was a division officer in the Navy, when we had cultural issues, I implemented a zero-tolerance mentality for sexual harassment, sexual assault. And as a young lieutenant, I knew exactly how many allegations, how many people were charged, how many people were convicted, and how many people were kicked out of the Navy. When I was vice president at Raytheon, I knew all of those numbers. And in this office, I know exactly what's going on in my office, and I hold those metrics very closely because it's important. We get what we measure, and if you guys think this is a problem, I would highly encourage you guys to ensure that you, as well as your leadership, Director Panchanathan, as well as Roger Crone, who's the CEO of Leidos, be briefed on exactly what's going on down there on the ice on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, to know those numbers, because you get what you measure. And if you guys don't have those metrics, if you're not briefing those metrics and showing improvement in that regard, I don't think you're really truly adopting a zero-tolerance mentality. You're implementing it, but without the accountability, without that sort of closed feedback loop that shows that not only are we listening to you, but we're taking these charges forward, we're implementing these charges, and we're holding people accountable. They're losing their jobs. They're being kicked off of the ice. They're going to jail, even if that's what's required for the assault. Without that, I don't know how you say you have learned your lesson. And I would strongly encourage you the next time you come to Congress to have those metrics available for you. That's what zero tolerance looks like. You have our support. We will bend over backwards to give you whatever funding is necessary. But we need you guys to make this the #1 key performance parameter on anything that you're doing. Safety is #1, and if you can't look your employees and Leidos employees in the eyes and say that you can't guarantee that they will not be raped or sexually harassed, then safety is not your #1 priority. This was a problem we had in the DoD. We're still going through those growing pains. But this is very near and dear to my heart because we have to, if we're going to ask people to go down to serve their country in any capacity, whether it's Antarctica or overseas, we've got to make sure that we know these metrics cold and be prepared to hold people accountable. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. McNerney.
Well, I thank the chairwoman, and I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for your leadership over the years, thoughtful, and you've made a difference, so thank you. I went to Antarctica in 2014 with this committee, and it was a profound experience. I'd go back any time except maybe their winters. But Dr. Marrongelle, thank you for your testimony this morning. The NSF has a pretty good reporting requirement for harassment, but did the NSF stop short of requiring that same level of reporting for its contractors?
Right. Our term and condition is one that we're very proud of. We've been a leader in this area. We are taking a look at how we can work with contractors moving forward if we need to institute something like a term and condition for contractors, if we need some change in law. We've certainly been in communication with your staff and will continue to do that. So we're still unpacking what's needed moving forward to ensure that we have the same level of reporting and accountability that we do for our grantees, for our contractors.
Thank you. Ms. Naeher, you mentioned that the McMurdo was a small city, and it is, and there's a lot of activity there. Any city has some bad actors in it, but in McMurdo, people can't just leave, and there's really no visible, at least when I was there, sort of law enforcement authority, so people may feel trapped in that environment. And so getting people to go there to work as contractors may be difficult. What are the positions that are hardest to fill for that assignment?
It's interesting you say that, and we certainly do have some hard to fill positions. Firefighters are routinely difficult to fill. But what was interesting when I was down there is that I met very few people who it was either their first time there or that they hadn't planned on coming back again. So despite the harsh environment working there, there is that dedication to mission, and people want to continuously come back year after year, season after season to support that mission. We do recruit heavily. We use our Leidos recruitment team, as well as working with our subcontractors to fill the difficult positions.
Well, thank you. Dr. Kelly, thank you for your thoughtful and comprehensive recommendations. And if these are implemented, it's clear to me that they'll make a big difference. In particular, I liked the behavioral standards establishment and dissemination and training in that. I think that would be the most effective of the many good recommendations you made. Do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to address this type of behavior before it rises to the level of illegality. Research shows over and over again that hostile work environments, while they may not be even at the level of illegality, enable far more severe behavior. When we are working in remote research sites, it's totally appropriate to ask for a higher standard of behavior both on and off the clock. And, if we're able to set those norms and enforce those norms on a regular basis, I think it would go a long way towards changing the culture. And again, I keep hearing that we need to rely on leadership to promote responses to these things, but really in these remote situations, it's often the leadership that is conducting the harassment and also are the gatekeepers for the future careers of these scientists. So we need to ensure that these behavioral standards, when they're not being met, are able to be enforced by multiple agencies, multiple reporting avenues, and not just the key holders to individuals' careers.
Well, how would an incident of harassment harm a researcher's career?
But if that harasser is your boss and you report your boss and there are consequences for your boss, that is a direct harm. Also, earning a reputation as a complainer or someone who maybe is filing false reports. the research shows that 80% or more of incidents are not reported at all because people fear the retribution and consequences.
And I just wanted to end by pointing out that I think the website idea for reporting seems like a good way to move forward and give people access to help if that's needed. And thank you.
Sounds good.
Dr. Lena. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bice is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I will echo my colleague from Oklahoma's words that it's been a pleasure to work with you these last 2 years, and good luck with your next adventure. Mrs. Marrongelle, you mentioned processes with the contractors / vendors, and that Leidos has said publicly that they'll be providing reporting. Are they providing you that reporting currently?
Yes, they are.
And how often are they providing that to you?
Quarterly.
Perfect. And you mentioned in a previous statement that you are looking at adding language to future contracts that would maybe address some of these issues when it comes to sexual assault cases. Why do you think that wasn't added to contracts prior?
It's a great question. I would need to consult with my team to follow up on that. It's a really good question.
Why would we not add language, I guess, is my follow-up question.
Right.
It seems like it shouldn't really be a conversation. It should be this is going to be added to future contracts.
I think so within the contracting world, I think we just want to make sure that whatever we're putting in there is consistent with what we're legally allowed to do, or ask to make those changes if we need to make changes to law.
Can you modify an existing contract with an addendum to be able to add language in it now, currently, to address these issues?
I believe we can. I can follow up to be 100% on that.
Sure. And finally, should you have a vendor, whether it's Leidos or any other contractor that you're working with at NSF, that is not meeting the expectations, not providing the information, not addressing the issue, are you and your team willing to cancel those contracts to protect the employees that you have at NSF?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Dr. Foster.
Yeah, Dr. Marrongelle, do you have the leverage that you need for all the different agencies, and particularly internationally on this? I noted that not long after the SAPA report came out, the Australian government issued an analogous one that came to, sort of equivalent conclusions. But it's my recollection as during my time on a very multinational experiment, there were well-known differences in the cultural behavior and standards in different areas around. First off, do you have the leverage? And then if any of the other witnesses would like to comment on the sort of international issues that may be here.
Yeah, thank you for this great question. So we, our staff, our leadership of the Office of Polar Programs currently sit on the international committee that oversees all of the scientific endeavors in Antarctica. So we have been working closely with them, and that group is looking to, with our leadership, form a specific task force to exactly tackle these issues, because Australia, like us, has looked into this proactively. We've uncovered behavior that we need to address, and we need to do this collectively. We also need to learn from each other, so I feel confident that we have the leverage that we need and the representation that we need and the leadership that we need in this international space.
All right. Yeah, Dr. Olinto, did you have any?
Yes, I think you point out a very important challenge for all of the scientific community. We have many, many international efforts. I myself lead a group with 16 countries, and the cultures are definitely different. And but I think the majority of our international partners are very aware. It's been a wonderful progress, and there's still a lot to do, but in terms of codes of conduct and meetings and many other spaces that bring the international community together, but we have had to implement cross nations, taking somebody off the ice that wasn't part of our team, for example, which was from a different nation. So I think we have to be able to do these things in these situations, otherwise we won't make progress.
And so the enforcement there is basically by consensus that the experimental group just says, I'm sorry, we're not going to deal with that country.
Yeah, we
because they're
have
not-"
right now separate codes of conduct for different experiments. We are trying to unify them within the University of Chicago, and I think most institutions probably want to be, I mean, we have our own rules within campus, but the question is, we send our people everywhere in the world, and how do we implement our own standards elsewhere? And we expect our people to behave the same way. We can't enforce international partners necessarily, but the community of science, for example, if we take CERN, that I'm sure you know very well, has a professional team that addresses exactly these issues. So we are learning from those kinds of large efforts how to make sure all cultures get the message that these things are not acceptable, period.
Yeah. Dr. Kelly, did you run into any, in your discussions here, which I take were international, did you run into real differences in opinion on what might or might not constitute acceptable behavior? Whoops, am I audible here? Or
Sorry, my audio, was the question addressed to me?
The
Could
question
you
was
repeat
whether
that?
you ran into international sort of differences of opinion of what the standards ought to be in this.
Yes, absolutely. When I was actually working in the Arctic program, I encountered this. I think it's really important to bring together teams at the beginning of campaigns, and have the home institution or the host institution do some education and to the entire team around behavioral expectations and norms, and also to have the host institution have folks read those and agree to those before arrival, but also continue that conversation while folks are on site. That's really important. And as part of that too, that the behavioral standards are shared across these teams, and that folks are held to them, to the highest standards, and that reporting is conducted to all of the home institutions and all relevant institutions, that not one institution is tasked with taking responsibility, but that they all are. And we see that as the best way to make sure that folks are held accountable in these kind of murkier and diverse situations.
Thank you. And I will use my last 7 seconds to echo my colleagues' gratitude to our chair for her years of service and what she has accomplished, which is truly historic. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. We're going to try to complete our hearing before we break for the vote, so we won't have to return. Mr. Veenstra, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson and Ranking Member Lucas, and thank you, Chairman Johnson, for all that you've done for this committee, and I wish you best on your future endeavors. I also want to thank the witnesses and your testimony for sharing the knowledge on this urgent subject. Dr. Olinto, one of the key characteristics of the U.S. Antarctic program is the cooperation between the NSF and the university stakeholders like the University of Chicago. From your perspective, is there any additional guidance or any other educational opportunities that could be helpful as we move forward based on the findings that came from this report?
Yes, there's a lot to do from all sides. I think we can improve our communications and our training. We need to make sure everybody on ICE is aware that this is an issue that has to be finished, that we don't want to ever have these situations again. And for that, every single person needs some responsibility. These are small teams and in very difficult, challenging places without boundaries between professional and social life. So we need to make sure every member has that notion of the expectations. And I think we need to have communications between our own deans of students and Title IX within each institution and NSF and Leidos. And it's a complicated set of folks that are supposed to be paying attention to these issues. And we've been discussing how we will try to do our best to make sure every institution involved that represents each of those individuals is able to talk to each other and make sure we follow up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those comments. And you hit it on the head that there's got to be follow-up, and hopefully there's also data or information that after 2 years from now that we can look back and say, all right, what did we accomplish and did we go down the right pathways? Dr. Marrongelle, the NFS obviously has field research facilities all over the world, many of them obviously in remote environments. The lessons learned, how can we apply these to other locations? And can it be a one-size-fits-all?
Yeah, this is a great question. So in instances where we see harassment and assault, there's a power differential, and certainly remote locations lead to the isolation that then creates the environment for such power differentials to result in harassment and assault. So as we look at what's happening in Antarctica and our response to that very isolated and very remote location, we have our eye on taking back the lessons learned, what's working, and how we can apply those to other field stations, whether it be research ships, whether it be other remote field sites on land, and even in our facilities that are in more remote locations with access to things like vehicles, but still somewhat remote throughout the world. So there will be elements that we will be able to translate across, but there will need to be elements that are unique to each situation.
Yep, I firmly agree with that. And Ms. Naeher, I guess my final question is, when you look at Leidos, how do we ensure, all right, when we have a bad outcome, right, when we have an assailant, and we have transportation issues, right? We're going to have transportation issues. How do we protect the victim when we have a bad outcome? In some circumstances, we probably don't have a plane or whatever it might be coming for days or weeks. So how do we move forward when we have problems like this?
So thank you for the question. And yes, the unique environment certainly makes this extremely challenging. There is a U.S. Marshal on site. So for cases of assaults, we turn that over to NSF, who manages that. We are happy to look into other possible things that can be done to include, refinement, confinement spaces, things like that, in order to keep everybody safe if needed. We would certainly be open to discussion with NSF if they wanted to partner to do something like that. I look at a little bit of like a medevac. I mean, we can do things to get planes in if needed in emergency situations, and we would work with NSF to determine when that threshold was met.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for their testimony. It was very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Obenole.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. Marrongelle, I had a question, kind of continuing the line of questioning from Mr. Feenstra and earlier Mr. Lucas. In reading over the needs assessment report and the implementation plan, I was struck by the fact that these findings really could be applied to any workplace setting. It's apparent that our problems with the USAP are particularly acute, but the way that we've addressed solving those problems doesn't seem to me to be tailored at all to the unique workplace setting of USAP. And I was surprised by that. I kind of thought it was a missed opportunity. There's only a single paragraph in the report that is dedicated to setting out these unique set of circumstances, the fact that it's a remote workplace settings where sometimes the boundaries between personal life and professional life can be blurred. It's only one paragraph in the report, and the only thing that's site-specific in the implementation plan are things like peepholes and key distribution. So I wonder if you could take a couple of minutes and talk about the unique workplace setting in Antarctica, how that contributes to sexual harassment and sexual assault, and the things that we can uniquely do to solve those problems in the USAP, because otherwise, I think this is a missed opportunity. We're really not talking about that in the implementation plan.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great question. So I think as as I alluded to in my previous response, the isolation really contributes to the prevalence of, or the increased prevalence of harassment. So when you have an advisor and doctoral students who are out in a field somewhere, you have now taken away the support system from the doctoral students should they be experiencing harassment from their advisor. So what is unique about Antarctica is figuring out ways to keep those individuals connected to their support systems, or even if it is in one of the stations, when you are, as my colleagues have said, when you are living and breathing every day with your colleagues, you don't get to go home to get away from them from the office because you are all in the same situation, in the same environment. So a couple of things that we're looking at is certainly our physical infrastructure. So we have prioritized building of a new lodging facility at McMurdo this year, which will provide single rooms. So that will help with some of the, if we need to, for the safety of individuals, do some isolation. That will help us be able to accommodate some of that. And then communication, so we mentioned the additional satellite phones that are going out to the field stations. We're not satisfied with that. We want to keep pressing on that. How do we ensure, again, going back to this support structure, that individuals are not isolated from their support structure? So the satellite phones are one step. But we're going to continue to press and understand how do we continue to provide access to individuals and services. The On Ice Advocate really has been impactful, very impactful just for the short time that the advocate's been there. So we'll be looking at, do we need to provide additional advocates, additional personnel? Do we need to provide other types of counselors or ombudspersons, and at which stations, and ensuring that no matter where you are on the continent, that you would have access. So those are some of the things that we've been thinking about. We wanted to ensure that we could implement speedily this season and get some things off the ground, but we know that the work's not done.
I'm glad to hear that. I wish that those subjects had been explored a little bit more thoroughly in the implementation plan, because frankly, to me, it seemed like it could have been copied and pasted from any other workplace sexual assault prevention plan anywhere. And with the things that you just said, I think, are the things that are really going to get to the crux of what's causing this situation. And if I could be so bold as to make an unsolicited suggestion, maybe look at the education part as well, because the things that you just said about the way that isolated setting contributes to those feelings of isolation and the way that the line gets blurred between professional and personal conduct, I think are things that we need to tell people who are going into that environment. And I think that if we do a good job at preparing people, that maybe when they get into those situations, they'll say, oh, right, that's right, I was warned about that. This is exactly what I'm going through. And I think that was missing in the implementation plan. But I want to thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for our shared commitment to reduce this problem that certainly should no longer be a stain on our research programs in Antarctica. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. That is our last questioner, and before we bring the hearing to a close, I want to thank our witnesses for testifying before the committee today. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from the members or any additional questions to the committee or witnesses. Our witnesses are now excused, and the hearing is adjourned. And I want to say that we have 10 votes before us, but plenty of time to vote. Thank you.